Hi, my name's Ciara Rodgers. I'm a visual artist based in Cork City, Ireland, and this is just a little snapshot into how I research some of my ideas and how I manipulate my materials in order to create a body of work. Before the COVID-19 lockdown, I was making large-scale drawings with charcoal and pastels, which is obviously a very dusty and messy process. I was also taking lots of road trips to capture Polaroid photography of sites that interest me, especially along urban and rural roadsides. I enjoy transforming these mundane, forgotten, or even considered quite ugly aspects of the built environment into something a bit more romantic and dreamlike. I'm also drawn to how the built landscape changes as technology advances and as society bends. And I'm currently finding myself wondering how it will change even more as we face a world where humans need to lessen their physical contact so much further. Since being restricted to my home, which has very little space for my usual practice, I've been rereading some books that have inspired my work over the past few years. I really find these books a useful tool to bring myself out of a position of feeling stuck with my work. This one, Brutal Bloc Postcards, consists of over 200 Soviet-era postcards from the Eastern Bloc. I'm really interested in postcard art, specifically from the communist era, and how much of what was built at the time was so monumental and now it lies defunct or it's been demolished since the fall of communism. What I find so interesting is the idea that something was so important at one time but now has become forgotten or even despised. The next book I'm going to talk about is Ruins, Documents of Contemporary Art, which has been a fail-safe for me since my master's in 2018. There are essays which are really inspiring in this book, which is part of a series, mostly written by artists, curators and art critics, with so much information about the modern ruin, past ruins, and even why artists have been so interested in ruins and abandoned spaces in general. One that I keep returning to is an early docufiction by the artist Robert Smithson titled A Tour of the Monuments of Passaic, New Jersey, 1967. This records a journey through an industrial wasteland where the artist reimagines rusty pipelines, buildings and bridges as monuments. I too share the desire that Smithson has to apply my own fiction to less appreciated landscapes and to reimagine what's already there. I also have a collection of postcards from Polish artists, which I collected during a semester studying abroad in the University of the Arts Poznan in 2016. This was a time when I was really becoming interested in the functions and metaphysics of architectural spaces. I returned to this collection recently to try and re-establish some of my visual concerns during this time of extreme uncertainty. And since I haven't been able to go on my road trips, I've been looking at other people's explorations of abandoned sites on YouTube and taking screenshots of spaces, objects and buildings to make drawing studies from. I'm interested in these spaces where things are left haphazardly either by vandals or by nature or by time. And specifically the ones that I've been looking at on these videos are set in places like the Arizona desert, in old mining or industrial towns, and there's a distinct difference in the level of decay. They're so different to how our Irish abandoned spaces present. Ours are covered in moss, ivy and a lot of damp, whereas these are very dry. Everything is still quite pristine, bar maybe a layer of dust, making it much easier for me to speculate on past activities and to create my own narratives around them. Also, instead of roadside photography, I've been taking Polaroids in my local vicinity within a 2-kilometre restricted radius, and I've continued to do so even as restrictions were softened. I've been really struck by the amount of high walls that I'm surrounded with here on the north side of the city, which gives me a sense of increasing restriction. What I really like about Polaroid photography is the blurry, timeless, dreamlike quality that transforms the mundane environments that we usually take for granted. I've created a small studio space in my living room because I find it essential to have a space where I can pin up all my research and materials in the same area and try and examine their visual value for creating some larger work once I'm back in a spacious studio. I've also been cutting up some of my Polaroids and manipulating them to create dreamy montages, playing with colour and monochrome, creating some peculiar landscapes and thinking about the value of miniature works of art within the Polaroid frame. I also collect objects that I can give a sense of character to, and I like to anthropomorphize them by manipulating their composition, such as what you see here. This installation is called Rosie the Robot from my solo show last year. At this time, I was heavily influenced by certain aspects of utopian mid-century modernism and the retro-futuristic 1960s animation, the Jetsons. I also like to explore some model making with plaster and dyes to influence my drawings, and these particular models mimic the decay of staining on aging concrete with some alternative hues like pinks and blues. I also grind up my pastels into powders that can be applied using a small brush, which softens the material even further. The drawing you see here is a section of a study, hopefully for a larger work, where I'm playing with objects and structures and the horizon line to convey a dreamlike uncanniness, which I love so much. And I've been looking at the work of the surrealist artist Leonora Carrington as sort of a gateway into this way of creating work. I'm also taking the visual qualities from my photo montages and combining dull greys and monochromes with candy tones. During these times of restriction, I've also been creating some handmade books or zines to explore text and image using my writing and photography. I'm really trying to create some alternative narratives around my research and my COVID walks, as I now call them. And finally, rather than using a traditional sketchbook, I consider my boards or a wall to be a sketchbook, which changes every few days as my ideas develop, and I photograph each change to document my process. Thank you for watching, and thank you to the National Sculpture Factory for commissioning this video.